Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Good evening. My name is Eric Schein. This is In the Zone. And today's program I have on co-host, co-producer, Edward Preston.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show, Edward. Okay, we're going to talk about federal contracting. It gets into collectivism, corporatism, fascism, feudalism, which is, literally it's been enshrined in our Constitution, which is the right to assemble. But what they do, to a large extent, and this goes even to the banks and more, is through fear and terror, use the right to assemble to force us to assemble, pool our resources together in one place. So initially they can skim off the top, they can take technology, get us to fund it, pay for it out of tax dollars, and then eventually basically take the entire program or industry or corporation or technology or resources like our gold reserve. Many people don't realize that the gold reserve held at Fort Knox and other places throughout the United States has not been audited since 1958. And when you think about that and you think about how they use these forces to pool our resources, like the National Strategic Oil Reserve, there was a scandal from the 1920s, Teapot Dome, and much of what is going on today is using that very same paradigm, coupling it with something like the Manhattan Project and the technology, not the atomic bomb, but the ability to take billions of US taxpayer dollars, build something that people had no idea what they were building. They actually had cities in Tennessee where I think it was 55 or 65,000 people lived in this city. The governor of the state of Tennessee, and this is related to the Manhattan Project, did not even know that this city existed in his own state. And people talk about, well, how can a conspiracy be carried on? How can these enormous corruptions be carried on? It's actually fairly simple, and it goes to, we've talked about this before, compartmentalization, need to know, segmentation or fractionalization, which is something that the banks get into. But one of the things I want to bring up initially is there's a program, and no one's really talking about this. It goes towards Homeland Security, and it goes into the helicopters and also even the drones. And they're doing this here on the coast in California and throughout the nation, is they're setting up quote-unquote rights of way, much like the railroads have done, much like we've done with the interstate and interstate highway system, but also not only are they doing it to establish the right of way, establish the federal contracts, establish that the U.S. taxpayers fund and initiate this program, but then they go ahead and privatize it. But then right now they're using like manned helicopters to run this program. Eventually they want to bring in drones, and they're already flying drones in Los Angeles, and this is just one of the kind of programs that's going on.
If you watch the History Channel or Discovery Channel on Future Weapons program, you could see that they're flying drones on a regular basis in the Middle East, in Iraq, and in other regions that, of course, are not fully disclosed where they're using it, because that's the whole idea of using a drone. If they lose it, it doesn't matter, because there's not a person attached to getting killed. Not that it really matters if a person gets killed to the U.S. government anyhow, but this is something that is usually carried out in other areas as test grounds, and then it's then applied on us here.
Well, and even if you go to the Third Reich in Nazi Germany, one of the things that there was, I guess, much conversation over was that if you have soldiers kill innocent civilians, it ruins a soldier because they're doing something they know they're not supposed to be doing. The same thing for a pilot in a plane, like even in Vietnam, if they're strafing, using Agent Orange, incendiary devices or anything else, and they see people getting killed, even though they're, nationals from a foreign nation, it still takes a toll on people, and you have to be a pretty callous individual to not allow that to affect you. You know, it may not, some people may be pretty tough and you say we're doing this for the mission, but over time as people, you know, get older, wiser, and they think back about what they're involved in and more is revealed to them, you know, you'd have to be a pretty cold fish to not allow it to affect you.
Well, I think this technological warfare that they're using is one way to distance that element,
Exactly,
the
that's what
human
I was,
element.
right.
It's almost like,
Well, it's a joystick
I sunk your
technology.
battleship, you know?
Exactly.
But taking it to a high-tech level.
As if it's a game.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're doing this to where they're carrying on training within the military to the point of where not only simulators, but to where they're using joysticks and they can actually operate the drones remotely, and they're doing it with a monitor, and the type of monitors and what is actually you know, seen by the operator can be limited by their commanding officers to where it's either infrared, so they wouldn't know, they'd see a person but no real face, or, you know, you've probably seen some of the pictures that have come back from Iraq where there was a couple individuals, they were trying to hide behind some kind of a building or something, and an aircraft actually took them out with 50 cal and just, you know, wasted them.
Well, what do you think all this training that you see when it comes to this war simulated activity on different like software like the Xbox, these other Nintendo type high-tech simulated warfare games?
Well, it's to desensitize.
Desensitize, but these are the future troops right here that are being
and it's
trained.
not just for foreign nations that they're being trained for. They're being trained, and you can even see this with the insurgencies coming across the border you know, in Mexico and Arizona and other states and Texas, even in California, where you have, you know, drug overlords coming in and going across the border, and our own border agents, border patrol agents, are coming in, like Campion and Ramos, are coming under attack for more or less doing their job. We've seen what's happened recently in MacArthur Park, where two of the you know,
Reporters?
individuals, well, no, two of the individuals who were in management who were responsible for what happened, they'd actually were also involved in an incident in 2000.
No, law enforcement.
Right, rather than, you know, having a hearing and removing them and kicking them out of, right, they were transferred.
Yeah. Well, isn't that something kind of like Wolfowitz and...
Yeah, to the World Bank. That,
Right,
that went on with McNamara.
Tenet.
With Vietnam,
Yeah.
McNamara was removed as
Fog of War.
Secretary
Interesting
of,
DVD, kind of writing your own final chapter in your own life's history.
Yeah, well, and what is the World Bank? And now I think you mentioned to me earlier today was about how South America is now starting to, again, this goes into collectivism, and we've talked about this with not only the North American Union, but they're trying to dissolve the United States from within, dissolve Canada and even Mexico to a large extent, build this North American Union.
It's like a wraparound trust deed.
Well, it's a change in
All-inclusive.
title. It's a change in title because now you change the name, you change the structure, just like, and you know, even Cheney has alluded to this, that countries don't go away. Companies, corporations do, and more theft is carried out in a bankruptcy, like we've seen what's happened with Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, Global Crossing, and more, to where when they went belly up or bankrupted, and a lot of these corporations are still alive and well today, but they got rid of pensions and did not pay them out to employees. And when you think about that, and you think about how the tax codes are written to where the pensions of the individuals is considered an asset of the corporation until it's paid out, it has every interest, a vested interest, in doing everything to make sure that you never get your pension.
I think the song from John Lennon called Imagine, No Countries. Well, right now, borders are really not being observed by these international corporate
the rule of law
elements. Well, the corporatization, globalization, internationalists, they do not observe any types of national boundaries
right.
because there is no national loyalty, and their loyalty is to the bottom line and to their
the almighty dollar,
exactly.
as many have, you know, coined the phrase. There's other things, though, that are going on besides the helicopters and the rights of way there and the enormous federal contracting that's going towards that, because it is to establish to where these helicopters are running up and down the coast, and then eventually they'll pull the manned helicopters out, put the drones in. They're already, like I said, you know, flying the drones in LA under the Sheriff's Department. But it's also where Homeland Security, the U.S. Coast Guard, much like Interpol, which is the international police, which is in Europe. They're trying to create in the United States, whether deals have been cut behind the scenes, who knows, but it appears that the United States Coast Guard here in the United States is to become the International Maritime Police, or Intermarpol, to the point where they're federalizing private yachts, which used to be the venue of the states for registration and more, and also licensing fees, and to where, you know, sure, if the vessel went into another state, if there was a need to, federal authorities could get involved for smuggling or anything like that if there was a probable cause.
Yes,
and we've seen outright how probable cause and even Miranda has been
stretched.
thrown out the door or thrown out the window. But not only are they federalizing the private yachts, they're internationalizing them. And there's companies like Integrated Coast Guard Systems that people like Admiral Loy, he was a former U.S. Coast Guard Commandant, he moved into the Transportation Security Administration that used to be the Transportation Safety Administration. That was a change that was carried out under Homeland Security and the Patriot Act and more. And we're seeing not only the militarization, but they're creating the very same super state here in the United States that was carried on in the German Republic, a military industrial, you know, police state, to the point where now the United States has taken on the position that Germany held. I mean, look at, we're seen as a pariah state by many nations around the world now and many peoples, to the point where the United States has taken on the position that Germany held in World War II, and now China somehow, which is a communist country, and we've seen what's happened in Tiananmen Square and more, has taken on the position, and when you think about it, China is much more rural, agrarian. It's just getting into and becoming very industrialized, much like the United States was at that time. And so a lot of this goes into not only the creation of the North American Union for us here, but also South America, the very same or similar type of union there, to where, like in our own Civil War, it's North versus South, Vietnam, North versus South, Korea, North versus South. Okay, Germany, we had East and West. Well, here they want to set up the battle between North America and South America. And you can see, like you had talked about earlier, was the creation of a quote-unquote World Bank for the South American countries.
Contingency.
Right.
So that way
which is collectivism again.
Exactly. They're pulling the resources
to be able to steal them.
As they're going to do for the NAU, North American Union, as they've already done for the European Union, the EU. And just a few months back, they just completed that swatch of countries there, including Romania and Bulgaria.
And Turkey's vying for...
Turkey's like on the next possible inclusion, but that might go into the other Eurasian kind of element of perhaps its own little conglomeration
which is a move towards one world government, and they're doing it administratively, but they're also doing it militarily and through, you know, we've seen even here in the United States where under Clinton, who was supposed to be a better president supposedly, he passed legislation, or legislation was passed under him, to bring in 100,000 more police officers nationwide. And we've seen what's even happened up in LA where I think it was a black individual, gentleman in an SUV, where the police had surrounded him, and they went ahead and fired off 110 rounds into the SUV and didn't even hit the individual. They actually shot other police officers in the crossfire. And it's just getting to the point of being out of control. We've seen what's happened in MacArthur Park. But we have a caller or two. Let's go ahead and take a quick call with a quick question. Caller?
Yes, I had a question. The banks are giving illegals credit cards and mortgages, but couldn't that also extend to terrorists?
Yeah, very much so. Thanks for the call, caller.
Okay.
You want to go ahead and field that?
Well, if you realize that the terrorism and that the propaganda behind terrorism, you have to go into it further. A good film to see, and you could see it online, would be Who Killed John O'Neill, and that's www.w.
You're not supposed to give out online, I don't think, on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Well, but anyhow, you can reference it and how to Google it. You can
reference it on Google, Who Killed John O'Neill, WKJO dot you know what.
Right.
Okay? But if you look at that and you look at the basis in the background, you'll see that terror has been an ongoing use of propaganda that has been used very successfully to motivate people to do whatever the nation state wants them to. Just like they did in Nazi Germany with the burning of the Reichstag.
Even in the 1800s here in the United States, they passed legislation to be able to build the railroads. They went and passed legislation to import Chinese from China, laborers, which, you know, rather than hiring people who were here in America, not only to build the railroads, because it was created as a public trust, but they used, much like the Autobahn in Nazi Germany, they used the railroads, they used the interstate and intrastate highway systems, right, like the Autobahn, to marry the provinces, marry the states, marry the counties together, and that's what much of the North American superhighway is about. It's it's a huge,
North American Super Corridor,
but it's a huge property grab, because it's going to be, you know, eminent domain has been passed now under Kelo versus Connecticut, which is to where private corporations can come in and grab property and do it as long as they increase the tax base. But they want to build this superhighway from Mexico through the United States into Canada. The road itself will be 1,200 feet wide with a 10-mile variance on either side. That's 20-mile swath of land from Mexico through the United States into Canada. And you talk about eminent domain.
That is the tie that binds the countries together.
Well, or splits and divides it. We have another call. We'll go ahead and take another quick question. Caller, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Great.
You?
No complaints, other than, as in, I'm enjoying your show and the subject matter. The only critique I would offer...
Well, do you have a question that goes to the topic?
Yes, and
we appreciate
here it is,
that.
but so listen to it. You keep saying the word they. Okay, they're going to do this. They want to do this. In reference, of course, to, let's call it the transnational economy, basically. The transnational economic powers, as they might call it in the ivory tower. Can you please give us some, can finally one of you guys out there on soapboxes finally give us some real specifics? Stop with these broad qualifier, but literally pronouns.
Well, caller,
thank you.
Caller, I appreciate the call, and you know we can go into. I was mentioning some of these like integrated Coast Guard systems. Admiral Loy, who was brought in, retired, moved out as Coast Guard Commandant into and took over the TSA. He was also the interim Secretary for Homeland Security while they were trying to find Tom Ridge's replacement. He's one of these corporatist, globalist, internationalists who's involved in all of this, as are many others, but it's large.
What's his name one more time?
Admiral Loy.
Admiral Loy.
Right, and there's many others. If you look into like what,
so give me more.
well, Blackwater.
Must have a bunch.
Blackwater. there's. I didn't even hear what you said. Thanks, caller. If you go to Jeremy Scahill's new book called Blackwater USA, I believe, it goes into, I think it's Cofer Black is the principal for Blackwater. And what they're trying to do down in San Diego is it's an 842-acre chicken ranch that they're trying to convert into a private mercenary camp for training, much like the School of the Americas did, which was referred to by people living in South and Central America as the School of the Assassins. Now they want to privatize that, and this is not the only camp they're doing. There's another one here in LA. There's a building project for centralizing and focusing and bringing all the executive branch forces, both state and federal, together in one building, which is vertical integration. Forget about separation of powers. You know, they're saying that separation of powers is a problem, whereas we've actually had a much better track record prior to taking the corporate model and trying to apply it to government to where everybody serves the king. I mean, that's literally what's happened, is to where the president is now, even Congress, he sees Congress, under this concept of the unitary government. Gonzalez has been an advocate for that, and Rice and Bush and Cheney and others, to where the legislative branch is its own tree, not a branch anymore. It's a tree unto itself where it has legislative, executive, and judicial powers, and now the executive branch itself is no longer a branch with independent separate and distinct powers. Sure, they cross over and intermingle, but there's some definition there. But to where now the executive branch has legislative, executive, and judicial powers. They're using executive orders as if they're legislation, and they're actually using them to change laws on, that Congress is putting out, and Congress doesn't get this. It's like the president saying, no, your laws apply to the Article 1, Congress, the legislature, doesn't apply to us because I can set policy, I'm the decider, period. The same thing for the courts, because now the courts feel that, and this is this whole concept on unitary government, to where the judiciary has its own legislative, executive, and judicial powers, and rather than following the law, they're using precedents and other judges' rulings or what they have to say to decide cases rather than the black letter law.
Well, addressing the Blackwater, they had said in a piece on mainstream media that they have on retainer 60 to 100,000 independent contractors. This could be considered Bush's private army.
Well, and if you think of what happened with Hitler in Nazi Germany, I believe it was about 60,000 troops that they had built up under the brown shirts. He went ahead and killed the individual who helped build up the brown shirts and took it over. And if you think about, what Blackwater is, it's a mercenary army. It's a private army here in the United States that could effectively, with the structure that we have, top-down structure, follow your orders, do what you're told, rather than, and that's really not how our system was set up. We were allowed to question authority. That's our First Amendment.
And they're bringing them in to train the military, and they're also...
Well, to take over and actually to be the commanders in the police force, the military.
capstone of the pyramid, to control from the top down. But in Iraq as well, their contractors are highly envied by other soldiers there, military, that are doing the same things as far as putting themselves in harm's way, but not getting the same type of equipment, not getting the same type of the special handling.
Well, the private interests have taken over.
Contractors
and we've talked about what a private trust is and what a public trust is and what the difference is. A private trust was limited by the antitrust laws, even the death tax or property tax, the Paris Hilton tax, and more, to where no individual would gain so much wealth, so much power, so much influence that, a very few or a very small handful of people could rule and control our country, our government, if not the world. But that's effectively what's happened. When you start looking at, SAIC, General Dynamics, General Electric, they own NBC, CBS with Westinghouse, Disney and more. Disney is exporting military industrial complex hardware in its theme parks. I mean, when you really look at the simulators and a lot of the other stuff that they're putting out, they're hiring line officers like they're going out of style because they knew the Bush administration was going to come in and change the law on its face to do away with overtime for anyone who had any kind of military training, federal government loans, served in Iraq for 4 years. You would not be eligible for overtime whether you work for a private service, corporation, or public service, state or federal government.
Well,
we got another caller real quick. Let's go ahead and take this quick question. Caller, welcome to the show.
I don't understand what you guys are talking about.
All right, caller, thanks. Appreciate you calling.
Okay, the military, general actually was used to undertake the massive development of Disney World and I believe Disneyland as well. So,
well, they even Pete Wilson helped move the highway, the 5, spent, I think it was $7 or $9 million of taxpayer dollars to go ahead and move the highway for Disneyland.
Wow, I wasn't aware of that. But what you see is this constant process of a militarization, centralization, and then privatization.
Big government, big corporations, big insurance, big, you could say ancient families or whatever, but a lot of this is all being glad-handed. If you will serve and help, especially in public service, and help either a corporation or a family, like former Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist. He's a perfect example, and I like to throw him out because it just blows my mind that more people don't know about this. His father and brother stole billions of dollars from the U.S. Treasury through 2 corporations that he owned, HCA and Columbia, 2 medical corporations. They had to pay back $1.7 billion to the U.S. Treasury. His father died. That's why he was before the Senate trying to kill the death tax, the estate tax, Paris Hilton tax, because he stood to, he was going to inherit billions of dollars that had been stolen from the U.S. Treasury, and he wanted to make sure that he didn't have to pay taxes on it. So he's in there advocating to change the law for himself and others.
Yeah, it's crazy. I just want to address this, though. As for the presidential candidates, it's really hard to find a single one willing to stand up and say, if Bush plans to take us into another war in the Middle East, he must first come to Congress for authorization. And if he goes to war without authorization, that will be impeachable. And I'll retreat into the quote-unquote all options are on the table mantra, which is another way of saying it's Bush's call. Now, the corruption of both parties is astonishing. Republicans used to be the party of the Constitution. No more undeclared wars, no more presidential wars. Democrats used to be the party of the people. People don't want this war. They don't want another war.
Well, I don't know if you've heard of the latest polls saying that 40% of Americans want impeachment of G.W. Bush and Cheney now. 40%, that's huge. And that poll is probably actually a little bit low.
And it's dated, and it's probably, in many cases, a lot of these polls are controlled by mainstream media.
Well,
so they're not reflecting truly what the public is feeling.
Well, and even the company that I brought up, Integrated Coast Guard Systems, that Admiral Loy and a lot of others have a hand in on, they're trying to literally privatize the Coast Guard, and then they're doing just like the military has done in selling F-16s to other countries and more. They want to sell platforms, Coast Guard cutters, drones, and more, to other countries where they own and control the technology for it, and they're making the money off of it, and it's going into this corporation that is held and controlled by a very small group of families. And you can even see now how not only Skull and Bones has come out with, even in the one movie, the one about the CIA that's been out recently, but George Bush and even Senator Kerry were members of Skull and Bones, and then Gonzalez is coming out. This goes to secret societies and, who really controls things and what's going on.
And this goes back to Europe.
Well, no, but the Federalist Society, and that's come out with the Gonzalez memos relating to what's going on right now in D.C. with the 8 U.S. attorneys have been fired. We're getting down to the wire here. I mentioned real quick too that this it relates everything that's going on right now with federal contracting violations, theft of U.S. taxpayer dollars. What they want to do is cave the country in, so there is no more United States, so that everything that they've been stealing is all covered up. Because at some point, if there is no more United States, what's the point in investigating or trying to find out where all the money went, what happened to the National Strategic Oil Reserve, and more? So
just destroy all the evidence and paper trail.
Right, and that's what, like even Halliburton moving to Dubai. That's a perfect example of what's going on. That's the show. This is In the Zone. My name's Eric Schein. Co-host is Edward Preston, and we'll be back and see you again soon. Thank you.